Honorable Speaker,
Almighty God, we give thanks to you, the creator of the universe, and humbly beseech you to direct and prosper the deliberations of the members of this house here assembled for the advancement of your glory and the trust and welfare of the people of Trinidad and Tobago. Grant that peace and happiness, truth and justice may be established among us for all generations. Amen. Amen. Namaste.
Oath or affirmation. Announcements by the Speaker.
Honorable members, Mr. Ganga Singh, MP, member for Shogunas West, Mr. Vassal Karim, MP, members for Shogunas East, and the Honorable Ayana Webster Roy, MP, member for Tobago East, have asked to be excused from today's sitting of the House. The leave which the members seek is granted. Honorable members, I have received correspondence from the President of the Senate dated November 18, 2015, on the appointment of members to joint select committees as follows. Dear Honorable Speaker, appointment of members to joint select committees. Your letter dated November 16, 2015, on the subject at caption refers. Please be informed that at a sitting held on Tuesday, November 17, 2015, the Senate appointed the following members to serve with an equal number from the House of Representatives on the joint select committees specified below. The Public Accounts Committee, Dr. Lester Henry, Mrs. Paula Gopeesingh, Mr. Wade Mark, and Dr. Danisha Mahabir. The Public Accounts Enterprises Committee, Mrs. Jennifer Batiste Primus, Mr. Foster Cummings, Mr. Wade Mark, and Mr. David Small. The Public Administration and Appropriations Committee, Mr. Clarence Rambarat, Ms. Alison Bashk, Mr. Daniel Duki, Mr. Roger Samuel, and Ms. Melissa Ramkisoon. The Parliamentary Broadcasting Committee, Ms. Christine Kangaloo, Vice Chairman, Ms. Nadine Stewart, Ms. Khadija Amin, and Mr. Paul Richards. The Committee on Government Assurances, Ms. Christine Kangaloo, Chairman, Mr. Foster Cummings, Ms. Khadija Amin, and Mr. H.R. Ian Roach. The Committee on Finance and Legal Affairs, Mr. W. Michael Coppin, Mr. Clarence Rambarat, Mr. Wayne Sturge, and Ms. Sophia Choate, SC. The Committee on Land and Physical Infrastructure, Mr. Franklin Khan, Mr. Hafiz Ali, Mr. Daniel Solomon, and Mr. Stephen Crease. The Committee on Social Services and Public Administration, Ms. Nadine Stewart, Mr. Hafiz Ali, Ms. Khadija Amin, and Dr. Danisha Mahabir. The Committee on Local Authorities, Service Commissions, and Statutory Authorities, Mrs. Jennifer Batiste Primus, Mr. Nigel De Freitas, Mr. Daniel Solomon, and Mr. H.R. Ian Roach. The Committee on State Enterprises, Dr. Lester Henry, Ms. Alison Bashk, Mr. Wade Mark, and Mr. David Small. The Committee on National Security, Mr. W. Michael Coppin, Mr. Nigel De Freitas, Mr. Wayne Sturge, and Mr. Torrell Shikrisoon. The Committee on Energy Affairs, Mr. Franklin Khan, Mrs. Paula Gopeesingh, Mr. Daniel Solomon, and Mr. David Small. The Committee on Foreign Affairs, Mrs. Paula Gopeesingh, Mr. Avinash Singh, Mr. Roger Samuel, and Dr. Danishar Mahabir. The Committee on Human Rights, Equality, and Diversity, Mr. Dennis Moses, Ms. Sarah Boudou, Mr. Roger Samuel, and Ms. Jennifer Raffoul. Establishment of 2 joint select committees, each to consider and report on a specific bill. Also, the Senate concurred with the establishment of a joint select committee on the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Amendment Bill 2015 and a joint select committee on the Whistleblower Protection Bill 2015. The following members were appointed to serve: Joint Select Committee on the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Amendment Bill 2015. Mr. Franklin Khan, Mrs. Paula Gopeesingh, Mr. Wayne Sturge, and Mr. David Small. Joint Select Committee on the Whistleblower Protection Bill 2015. Mr. W. Michael Coppin, Mr. Foster Cummins, Mr. Wade Mark, and Ms. Sophia Choate, SC. Accordingly, I respectfully request that you cause these matters to be brought to the attention of the House of Representatives at the earliest convenience. Yours respectfully, Senator the Honorable Christine Kangaloo, President of the Senate. Appointment of members to sectional select committees. Honorable members, pursuant to Standing Order 89-2, I have appointed the following members to serve on the sectional select committees of the House of Representatives for the first session 2015-2016 of the 11th Parliament. On the House Committee, Mr. Ganga Singh in lieu of Dr. Lakram Bodo. On the Committee of Privileges, Dr. Sururatan Rambachan in lieu of Dr. Rudal Munilal. On the Statutory Instruments Committee, Mr. Rudranath Indar Singh in lieu of Dr. Fuad Khan. And on the Business Committee, Mr. Ganga Singh in lieu of Dr. Rudal Munilal.
Bills brought from the Senate, petitions, papers.
The Minister of Finance.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers. The report of the Auditor General of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago on the statement of recovery of expenses of the Ministry of Energy and Energy Affairs for the year ended December 31st, 2014. The annual administrative report of the Betting Levy Board for the year July 1st, 2012 to June 30th, 2013, and the final report on the 9th actuarial review of the National Insurance System as of June 30th, 2013. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that paper number 1 be referred to the Public Accounts Committee.
Honorable members, the question is that paper number 1 be referred to the Public Accounts Committee. All in favor say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Minister of Education.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay on the table the following paper: the Annual Administrative Report of the Ministry of Tertiary Education and Skills Training for the period October 2013 to September 2014.
Minister of Labour and Small Enterprise Development.
Madam Speaker, on behalf of the Minister of Labour and Small Enterprise Development, I have the honor to lay on the table the following papers. Papers 4 and 5, the annual reports of the Registration, Recognition and Certification Board for the years 2011 and 2012.
The Deputy Speaker.
Madam Speaker, I have the honor to lay on the table the following paper: a special report number 1 of 2015 of the Ombudsman of Trinidad and Tobago, submitted under Section 94(4) of the Constitution.
Reports from committees. Prime Minister's questions.
The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question to the Honourable Acting Prime Minister, and may I take the opportunity to congratulate him on his appointment as Acting Prime Minister. He seems very happy.
Smiling.
Can the Acting Prime Minister state whether all Trinidad and Tobago students attending university on scholarship have received their tuition disbursements?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Due to the short notice of this question, which is usual for Prime Minister's questions, I am not in a position to state definitively whether all Trinidad and Tobago students have received their tuition disbursements. What I can say, however, is that the Ministry of Education is making every effort to ensure that all tuition disbursements are paid on time.
Member for Caroni East.
Could the Acting Prime Minister state whether the foreign reserve, the National Foreign Reserve, has increased or decreased between September 8, 2015 and November 26, 2015, the date I filed the question?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The foreign reserves are calculated on a weekly basis, and therefore it is not possible to give precise figures within the short space of time afforded to me to answer this question. However, what I can say is that on September 11th, the foreign reserves, the net foreign reserves, stood at US $10.3 billion, equivalent to 11.7 months of import cover. And on November 20th, the foreign reserves stood at $9.6 billion, equivalent to 11 months of import cover.
Would the Honourable Acting Prime Minister indicate whether that decrease to 9.6 included the 500 million that the central bank, in conjunction with your discussion with them, would that have been included in your figure finally, which you stated?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would not want to talk out of turn. The 500 million was injected in November, but since these figures are at November 20th, I would not want to say definitively whether that is so or not. I believe so, but I do not wish to make a categorical statement that the 9.6 billion was after the injection of 500 million, but I'm reasonably confident that it was.
Could the acting Prime Minister, Honorable Acting Prime Minister, indicate if he's aware, if you have any knowledge as to when you came into government, what was the foreign reserve since you were Minister of Finance at the time? 10.3.
I answered that on September 11th, which is when all ministers were sworn in. It was $10.3 billion.
Member for Caroni East.
Could the acting Prime Minister state whether the budgetary measures in relation to VAT collection so far have producing the anticipated results?
Madam Speaker, I found this to be a very curious question, and one gets the impression that the honourable member was not paying attention during the presentation of the national budget, because it was clearly stated during the presentation and during the detailed examination of the estimates and on a number of occasions afterwards and in the other place last week in answer to a matter on the adjournment, that the adjustments to the VAT regime are scheduled to take effect on the 1st of January 2016, which has not yet arrived. So it is not possible to answer this question because the VAT changes have not yet taken effect.
Member for Caroni East.
Is the acting Prime Minister aware that many URP workers have been dismissed since the new administration took office?
I am not so aware.
Member for Caroni East.
His attention, would it be possible?
Caroni East.
Can we bring it to your attention?
Member for Caroni East, but that's not a question. Yeah. So I wouldn't permit that. So when I called member for Caroni East, it was with respect to the other question that you have.
Well, can I just ask a supplementary on the last, if you would kindly permit?
You're entitled to 4 supplementary once they arise out of the question or the response.
Would you be kind enough to make inquiries as to the question, as to the and report?
I'm assuming that the honourable member is associating that question with the original question, and the answer is certainly.
Member for Caroni East.
Is the acting Prime Minister aware that many contract employees in state enterprises have been dismissed since the new administration took office?
Madam Speaker, we are aware that there were a number of short-term contracts scheduled to terminate on the 30th of September. With respect to the actual question, I am not aware, but I would say that in my capacity as Minister of Finance, my other capacity, I received a report that there are over 7,000 contract employees within the public service, and the government has recently appointed a committee to review contract employment. But with respect to this specific question, I am not aware how many, or if any, contract employees have been dismissed since this administration took office.
Would you consider it kindly to inquire into whether there have been employees in state enterprises who have
Being dismissed.
who have lost their jobs?
Madam Speaker, I am not aware, and I do not think I have the capability to answer a new question in 5 seconds, but I would most certainly determine if that is so.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. May I start by congratulating the member for the Gomati Northeast on his ascension to the acting Prime Minister after almost about 20-some years. Congratulations. I decided to give him a very simple question that belongs to your ministry. Can the Acting Prime Minister explain how the government intends to address the foreign exchange shortages facing businesses?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I would like to thank the Honourable Member for Barataria San 1 and also the Leader of the Opposition for their very kind sentiments. With respect to this particular question, the government is keeping the foreign exchange availability situation under review on a regular basis. In fact, we are monitoring this on a weekly basis. What I can say at the outset is that when one examines the conversions of foreign exchange in the commercial banking sector, you would see, and this is something that was reported yesterday at the post-cabinet press conference, you would see that in 2013, the conversion of foreign exchange in the commercial banking sector was of the order of $5.8 billion US, and the quantum of foreign exchange injected into the system by the central bank was of the order of 1.3 billion, which gives you a demand for foreign exchange annually in aggregate of just over $7 billion US. Based on the preliminary analysis that has been done since the new government came in, the foreign exchange demand has continued at a level of approximately $7 billion US in 2014 and also in 2015 so far. In 2014, the conversions in the commercial banking sector, this is by manufacturers and other earners of foreign exchange, was reduced from 5.8 billion in 2013 down to about 5.5 billion in 2014. As a consequence, the injection by the central bank increased from 1.3 billion up to about 1.6 billion to maintain the same availability of foreign exchange in aggregate. In 2015 so far, the central bank has injected just over 2.6 billion as the conversions have fallen to below 5 billion. And this is a direct result of the decrease in commodity prices. But the availability is more or less the same in 2013, in 2014, 2015. So we're monitoring the situation and we're taking appropriate action to ensure that there is a supply. I could also say that the recent injection of $500 million was to clear a backlog of foreign exchange demand in the system. It has now rebooted and reset the system.
I just want to ask the Honourable Acting Prime Minister if he's aware that the pharmaceutical companies have been indicating that they are not getting the foreign exchange for vital drugs. If you're not aware of it, could you just look into that aspect, please?
I am not aware, but I would most certainly look into the matter and take appropriate action.
Honourable Member for Tableland.
Acting Prime Minister, can you say whether, in fact, with respect to the question in addressing how the government intends to address the foreign exchange shortage, whether any analysis is being done to see whether the foreign exchange being released is really reaching the legitimate traders, or whether financial institutions have been using the money for their own use in terms of payments and so on? Because one bank, you recall, did stop selling foreign exchange in August of this year.
Based on the information so far, the injection of 500 million, which was a measure taken to ease the shortage of foreign exchange, has been used for trade-related purposes. But trade-related purposes. But we have been primarily. But we are going to drill deeper into this matter, do some more in-depth analysis to ensure that the system of distribution is practical and in the best interest of all concerned. We are keeping this under constant review.
Is the Acting Prime Minister aware that people who need foreign exchange are being called to say how much you want by certain banks, and based upon their ability to find the TT equivalent to pay, that they're paying higher rates?
Sure that that is a supplemental question. Okay, so I will not allow the question. Member for Caroni.
Could the Honourable Acting Prime Minister indicate whether they have done the research or the inquiry into the payment of the 500 million released by the central bank, as you had indicated from what I read on the press?
Madam Speaker, I thought I just said that, but for the benefit of the member who does not seem to be paying attention, I said that we examined the distribution of the 500 million and it was primarily used for trade-related purposes. I did say that 2 seconds ago. What I would also say is that I want to repeat that the central bank has already put 2.6 billion US into the system, and the recent injection of 500 million was designed to clear the backlog. So there's been very active participation by the central bank in 2015 to deal with the demands for foreign exchange, and we are keeping it under constant review.
Prima.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. And I join with my colleagues in congratulating the Honourable Member Diego Martin Ortiz for his accession to the position of Prime Minister. And I'd like to ask the following question. Is the acting Prime Minister aware that many contracted officials employed in embassies and high commissions abroad have been dismissed since this new administration took office?
I am not so aware, but what I am aware is that many of the persons who were engaged at these missions were political appointees, and it is quite normal on a change of administration to have changes in political appointees.
Is the Minister comfortable that, with his statement regarding these dismissals, and are they consistent with a statement made by the Prime Minister that no citizen need fear to be fearful of victimization?
Remember,
Yeah.
I'm not going to allow that as a supplemental question. It doesn't follow from the answer, which said, if I remembered well, your question was framed with respect to dismissals. Yes. I believe the member, but I believe the member also said that these contracts came to an end.
No, he didn't. He did not say that.
But in any event, I am not allowing that as a supplemental.
May I ask another supplemental question?
Continue rules.
Is the Minister prepared to indicate when terminal and other benefits will be paid to these dismissed officers, consistent with their contracts? That is not.
Madam Speaker, I answered the first part by saying I was not aware that contracted officials had been dismissed. And since I am not aware that contracted officials have been dismissed, I am in no position to indicate whether terminal benefits would be paid because I'm not aware that contracted officials have been dismissed.
Member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I too want to join in congratulating the member for Diego Martin Northeast in ascending to the office of Acting Prime Minister. And I take the opportunity to ask the Acting Prime Minister, is the decision of the Board of the National Gas Company to introduce a wage freeze one that your government supports?
Madam Speaker, it is necessary to put this issue into some perspective. In 2012, the profits of the NGC Group totaled $9.6 billion. In 2013, the profits fell to $6.6 billion. In 2014, the profits fell to $4.4 billion. And in 2015, the profits are forecasted to fall below $3 billion. In addition, Madam Speaker, the prices and the margins in the sector are projected to be lower than usual for a considerable period of time. This will impact upon the profitability of the National Gas Corporation. As a consequence, the National Gas Corporation issued a memorandum on the 16th of November 2015, and in this memorandum, they indicated that There will be no market adjustment in salaries for 2015 and 2016. There will be no merit increases in salaries for 2016. And there will be a ceiling on gain share payments at 6 weeks basic salary for both 2015 and 2016. The National Gas Corporation took this action in the context of the declining profitability of the company.
Honourable Member for Superior.
Honourable Minister, was that decision taken by the board? Is that decision supported by your government?
Questions or one question? I'm not certain.
Honourable Speaker, it is the identical question on the paper that was not answered, so I'm asking it again.
It's the identical question on the paper that is being asked.
It's one question.
Madam Speaker, the decision was taken by the board, and as the substantive Prime Minister has indicated at another time in another place, and which I also endorse, in the face of declining profitability, it was a sensible move on the part of the company.
May I ask a supplemental?
You may, member.
Does wage freeze represent a national policy by the government for the state sector?
That's a much wider question than the original question asked. I don't think it's a supplemental question. I think it's a new question. I won't allow it. Member for Naparima.
Could the acting Prime Minister state whether the Prime Minister will be attending any private political fundraising events while on his current official visit?
The substantive Prime Minister, the Honourable Dr. Keith Christopher Rowley, has already indicated at another time in another place that in his private time, on one of the evenings that he will be in the United Kingdom, that he will be attending a private event.
Naparima.
Is the acting Prime Minister, is the Prime Minister following in your proper protocols? Well, while on official business abroad, he's supposed to attend public partisan events.
I don't think that is supplemental. I think that is a fresh question. I don't think it's supplemental to the answer given.
I have a copy.
Member for Tabakit.
Acting Prime Minister, could you inform this House as to when will the San Fernando to Point Fortin Highway be completed?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. It is difficult at this point in time to give a precise answer to that question because of the manner in which the project was mismanaged by the previous administration. Madam Speaker, I participated in my other capacity on a site visit with the Honourable Minister of Works and Transport and the Honourable Minister of Rural Development and Local Government to the highway construction, approximately 1 month ago, I believe. And we observed that on the face of it, the physical works are barely 50% complete, whereas the contractor has been paid almost 70% of the cost of the project. In addition, Madam Speaker, it appears that the former administration made some design changes which have reduced the scope of the project and have downgraded the effectiveness of the project. As a consequence of all of these events, the mismanagement of the project by the former administration, the possible overpayment to the contractor, and the reduction in the design scope of the project, the government is currently conducting a comprehensive review and will take appropriate action in due course. It is therefore not possible to state at this time precisely when the project will be completed.
Acting Prime Minister, through the Speaker, are you aware that November 24th, yesterday, that the OS had the right to terminate the contract, and did it use that right?
Madam Speaker, the former administration made no financial arrangements for the funding of the Point Fortin Highway beyond October of 2015. The new government is now faced with the problem of raising the necessary finance to complete the project. The matter of which the honourable member speaks is a direct result of the gross incompetence of the last administration in not arranging proper long-term financing for this project. I wish to state, however, we have this matter under constant review. We have hired experts, and we will take appropriate action to safeguard the national interest.
Member for Faizabad.
Speaker, and may I also take this opportunity to congratulate the member for his ascension to the acting Prime Minister, and to ask, is the Honourable Acting Prime Minister aware that there is reportedly a shortage of CDAP drugs in the country?
Again, Madam Speaker, the issues currently being faced by the Ministry of Health with respect to CDAP drugs are a direct result of the failure of the former administration to finalize long-term arrangements with the supplier for the supply of drugs. Madam Speaker, the Minister of Health was faced with a month-to-month contract arrangement, unresolved negotiations, a missing long-term contract for provision of drugs, and despite that, Madam Speaker, the Minister of Health has managed to manage the situation admirably to make sure there's a proper supply of drugs in the pharmacies.
Honourable Member for Miaru.
Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Please settle down. Members, please settle down. Honourable Member for Miaru.
Thank you. Would the acting Prime Minister inform this House whether a decision has been taken by Cabinet to freeze wages throughout the public sector?
The answer is no.
Is Cabinet... Thank you, Madam Speaker. Is Cabinet given consideration to such a policy, and what approach and measures are being pursued to achieve this objective?
The answer to this supplementary question is also no, and therefore the other part of that question does not apply.
Member for Miaru.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Would the acting Prime Minister inform this House whether his government intends to settle the outstanding wage negotiations in a number of state enterprises, including TNTech, NP, Petrotrin, UTT, Powergen, among others? Thank you.
The answer is yes.
Urgent questions?
Member for Caroni East.
Minister of Education, Madam Speaker, is the Minister aware that a number of schools are currently closed in Trinidad, and what is the Minister doing to address this present issue?
Madam Speaker, the simple answer to this question is yes. I am aware that there are a number of schools that are closed at this present time. In fact, I can point out to you some of the schools that are closed: South Orpush RC Primary, safety issues; Palo Seco Government Primary, sewer problems; Vistabella Presbyterian Primary, electrical problems; Brothers Presbyterian Primary, health and safety issues; Moruga RC Primary, building demolished; Aruka Government Primary, electrical; Lower Government Primary, non-functioning air condition; Piccadilly Government Primary, building declared unsafe; Raghunanan Road Government Primary, clogged sewer drains; Shigona's Government Primary, sewer problems; Mono Road, Hindu, awaiting approvals. Madam Speaker, The Education Facilities Company Limited, as we are well aware, was given its papers on the 9th of November. Since then, as minister, I met with them on 2 occasions. The first was on the 16th of November, and the second occasion was on the 24th of November. At our meeting on the 24th of November, I mandated the EFCL to do everything that was possible to ensure that those schools that are closed are open in the shortest possible time. On that occasion, I was informed that everything was being done so that at least 9 of those schools will be ready for occupation on Monday, the 30th of November. Madam Chairman, I wish to state that our government is committed to providing quality education to the nation's children, and we are to ensure that the conditions under which our children and our teachers work and study are safe, healthy, and fit for teaching and learning. I would like to point out, Madam Speaker, that
It's expired.
Okay, thank you.
For Caroni East.
The Honorable Minister of Education indicate whether he thinks that this is to remedy these situations is taking an extraordinarily long period of time when particular areas like sewer could be done in 2 or 3 days, and these are taking 3 to 4 weeks. 3 to 4 weeks. Extraordinary. We used to do it in 3 days. 3 days we repair them.
Yeah. Madam Speaker, I would like to inform the member for Caroni East that all these problems are problems that we met and are problems that were caused by the former administration. We are working assiduously, Madam Speaker, to ensure that these problems are rectified in the shortest possible time.
The Honourable Minister's answer, if he met it, it means then that do you believe then that you have been taking more than 2 months to deal with this problem? And possibly, if you said you met it, so it means there's more than 2 months you're taking to deal with the problem.
Madam Speaker, these problems go way back before September the 7th. The EFCL at that time, their concentration was on building new schools and neglecting repairs and maintenance of our schools. And that is the core of the problem. Also associated with that was the high level of corruption and mismanagement. And therefore, Madam Speaker, this government, this minister or the Minister of Education cannot be blamed for the misdeeds of the former government. Thank
you. Is the minister aware that under the last administration, more than 5,000 repair and maintenance projects had been undertaken by EFCL in a 5-year period, with more than 1,000 contractors doing these in short period of time at minimal cost?
Members, may we have some order, please?
Madam Speaker, I am sure that the member for Caroni East and the former Minister of Education is well aware of the sloppy work that was done by the EFCL. And all of us in this country are aware that many of the repair works that were done not to the standards that one would have expected of a company. And as a result, our students are suffering today because of the poor work that was done previously. Thank you.
Supplemental.
Only two questions.
To the Minister of Health, given the recent reported deaths of yet another mother and infant at the Mount Hope Maternity Hospital, could the Minister state whether an independent inquiry will be established to investigate and analyze maternal deaths in Trinidad and Tobago with a view to decreasing maternal mortality?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, in response to the question, we are taking swift action to address the issue of maternal deaths, not for any particular case, but from 1990 to 2013, we have had no significant impact. To that end, this administration and this Minister of Health has engaged the services of the Pan American Health Organization, commonly called PAHO, who will be here in January of 2016 to complete a comprehensive audit of all our maternity services with special emphasis on the Mount Hope facility.
The member for Caroni East.
To the Minister of Housing and Urban Development, could the Minister indicate how many current Housing Development Corporation applicants will be affected by the government's new policy with regards to the qualifying income level?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. The Home Application Fulfillment System database has a total of 168,065 applicants. Of the 168,065 applicants, 1,186 are listed as earning over $25,000 monthly. However, 15,000 persons did not indicate their income level. This 1,186 of the database represents 0.07% of the total database, which will be affected by our new qualifying income level policy.
Supplemental. Honorable Minister. Yes, sorry.
These are under urgent questions, and the standing orders only allow supplemental questions by the person who's asked. Okay, so that you can proceed.
Could the Honorable Minister indicate this, the figure you gave of 1,186 plus, whatever, is that the figure for combined household or just one applicant on it, the 25,000? Is it for the combined figure?
Certainly, it is combined. Thank you.
Member for Couva South.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Due to the recent, to the Minister of Works and Transport, due to the recent incidents of carnage on our nation roadways, could the Minister indicate when will speed gun, speed cameras and the point system in relation to driver's licenses be implemented as legal measures?
Madam Speaker, carnage is horrific. My condolences to those who were affected by those horrible road deaths over the last few weeks and for all time, as a matter of fact. Madam Speaker, in respect of cameras, the Motor Vehicle and Road Traffic Bill 2014, which was debated in both houses of Parliament in the last session, and which was allowed to lapse on the 17th of June 2015 as the Parliament was dissolved, made provisions for both the speed cameras and, of course, the points system to penalize drivers who were repeat offenders of our road traffic laws. Madam Speaker, we propose to bring this bill back in quick and short order and to send it, if our friends on the other side consider it necessary, to a joint select committee for further review. As it relates to speed guns, the very bill made provision for speed detection devices to be used or speed guns. Cabinet, by minute number 3186 of November 2013, agreed at a sum of some $7.6 million for 400 speed guns. It turned out that because of their incompetence, this was grossly adequate to acquire 400 guns. Cabinet, minute 1578 of July 2015, agreed that we purchase, that the government purchased guns to the sum of 7.6 million. VEMCOC engaged in the process for procurement. A contractor has been identified. The award of the contract is expected very soon. And as soon as the new board, we're in a bit of transition, as soon as the new board in a couple of days goes in. Thank you.
Speaker, supplemental.
Honorable Member, you may.
Okay. Taking into consideration the issue of the roadworthiness of vehicles and checking on it, could the Honorable Minister state when the Motor Vehicle Authority building at Frederick Settlement in Caroni, when it will be formally open and operationalized to check the roadworthiness of vehicles, Madam
Honorable
Speaker?
Member, I would not permit that as a supplemental question.
Madam Speaker.
Honorable Member, is this a supplemental question?
No.
It's not a supplemental question?
No.
Well then,
Written answers.
Excuse me, written
Written
answers?
answers, yes.
1 minute, please let them announce it. 1 minute.
Questions on notice?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, we are able to answer all the questions on the order paper. With regard to written questions, Madam Speaker, we recognize that the written question qualifies for today's date, and we will be ready at the next sitting to present the written answer for that question. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
And therefore, the response is deferred under the Standing Order 2912. Member for Barataria, Sanwa.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Question number 2 to the Minister of Health.
Thank you. In response to question number 2, the quantum of money spent to date on the formation of the National Health Facility Services Company Limited for the period 2013 to 2015 is $460. The details are as follows. Registration of company, $120. Change of directors, $40. The company's logo, $300. B, during the period 2013 to 2015, no expenditure was incurred by the National Health Facilities Service Company Limited.
Could you once again say the total quantum? Is it $460 total? All right. May I say that are you aware that in the budget presentation you made an indication that $8 million was spent on that?
Yes.
And would you like to retract that statement?
No. In the budget contribution, I said there was a cabinet note dated July 8, 2015, where the cabinet was granting approval for the sum of $8 million. And the breakdown then, if we did not come into office, you would have spent $1 million on personal expenditure, which includes salaries to CEO, $5 million on goods and services, and $2 million on minor equipment purchases. If we did not have an election, we would have spent that, and that is what I alluded to in my budget contribution.
Could I actually ask the Honourable Minister if the note that he's referring to is a confirmed cabinet note?
It's a note for cabinet which you were going to take. And if we did not have an election, this is what you would have taken to cabinet, which you would have spent.
Madam Speaker, I just would like to ask, was it a confirmed cabinet note?
I answered you already.
No, I was asking, was it a yes or no answer of a confirmed cabinet note?
Honourable Member.
Could the Minister answer, please?
But I believe the Minister answered. You can't tell him how to answer. Honourable Member, I believe the Minister answered your question. And I have determined that. This is a further question? Yes.
Then, Minister, am I to assume then it was not a confirmed cabinet note?
Yeah, asked and answered.
Can we then move on, please? May I call again, Member for Barataria Sanwan.
Speaker, question number 3 to the Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you. Answer to Part A. The National Health Card Program is operational and is currently deployed across 271 CEDA pharmacies. Answer to Part B. To date, the number of persons registered is 14,526. And answer to Part C. The projection for the registration of new persons during the fiscal year 2016 is estimated at 30,000 persons.
Member for Barataria Sanwan.
Question number 4 to the Honourable Minister of Health.
Thank you. Answer for question number 4. The Couva Children's and Adult Hospital, and I congratulate you for referring to its correct name, Children and Adult Hospital, will be fully commissioned after design and or construction defects that are likely to affect the proper functioning of the hospital have been remedied, and all issues relating to staffing, equipping, outfitting, and operation of the facility have been addressed.
Honourable Member for Barataria
Have you done on a confirmed cabinet note?
Honourable Minister of Health.
It will be done following proper process, which is something you are not familiar with.
For leave to move the adjournment of the House on definite matters of urgent public importance.
Member for Couva North.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In accordance with Standing Order 17 of the House of Representatives, I hereby seek your leave to move the adjournment of the House at its today's sitting for the purpose of discussing a definite matter of urgent public importance, namely, the failure of this government to adequately address the very serious effects of the closure of 16 schools on thousands of children, parents, teachers, and staff in Trinidad and Tobago. The matter is definite insofar as these 16 schools have not opened since the reopening of the school term on September the 8th, 2015, and as a consequence having a serious impact on the education of thousands of school children, including those students preparing for the SEA examinations. The matter is urgent because of the immediate and severe impact on the education of thousands of school children, their parents, teachers, and staff. Additionally, parents and the business community are affected as parents are being forced to take emergency leave or use sick leave to stay home to supervise their children or pay for alternative arrangements. This is also affecting the productivity levels of the business sector and the public sector. The matter is also of public importance given the cause of the closure of 16 schools has yet to be ascertained and citizens have not been properly informed as to the reasons behind closures. Further, it raises serious concerns on the preparedness of SEA students sitting the SEA examinations. Thank you.
Honourable members, I am not satisfied that this matter qualifies under Standing Order 17.3, and I advise the member to pursue this matter under Standing Order 16. The Leader of the Opposition.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. In accordance with Standing Order 17 of the House of Representatives, I hereby seek your leave to move the adjournment of the House at today's sitting, that is Friday, 27 November 2015, for the purpose of discussing a definite matter of urgent public importance, namely, the failure of government to enunciate a clear and cogent economic policy to guide Trinidad and Tobago through the challenges. The matter is definite because the slowdown in the performance of the economy has the potential of generating massive job losses and unemployment, which has been manifested and continues to manifest itself in the state sector. The matter is urgent because of the chronic slowdown in the performance of the economy, generated in the main by external influences and internal political managerial incompetencies. The matter is of public importance since it poses a clear and present danger to personal and public security challenges which may arise in Trinidad and Tobago from the disruption of social peace through protests and possibly social unrest and instability. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
Honourable members, I am not satisfied that this matter qualifies under Standing Order 17.3. I advise that the member pursue this matter under Standing Order 16.
Statements by ministers.
The Acting Prime Minister.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I am authorized by the Cabinet to make the following ministerial statement. The National Insurance Board of Trinidad and Tobago has been in operation since 1972 and is a major institution in the landscape of Trinidad and Tobago. The National Insurance Board has paid in excess of $30 billion in benefits since its inception and currently manages a fund of approximately $26 billion. The NIB provides comprehensive long-term, short-term, and employment injury benefits to approximately 517,000 workers, with over $4 billion currently paid to beneficiaries on an annual basis. With an established administrative expense limit of 7.5% of contribution income, the NIB has been able to operate with an average administrative expense ratio of 5.4%. In fact, according to the findings of the 9th Actuarial Review, Trinidad and Tobago stands in the group with the lowest administrative expense ratios among Caribbean countries. According to Section 70 of the National Insurance Act, an actuarial review of the system of national insurance shall be undertaken within 3 years of the date on which the first contributions under this Act are payable, and thereafter at 5 yearly or shorter intervals as the Board may determine. Madam Speaker, since inception, the National Insurance Board has complied with this obligation, and to date, 9 reviews have been conducted. Previously, actuarial reviews were conducted at 5 yearly intervals. However, in recognition of the rapid changes affecting social security systems worldwide, including the national insurance system in Trinidad and Tobago, the NIB adopted a prudent approach to conduct actuarial reviews at shorter intervals. Beginning with the 9th actuarial review, these reviews are now being conducted at 3-year intervals. I've had the privilege of laying the recently concluded 9th actuarial review of the national insurance system earlier today, as of June 30th, 2013, in this House. This review was conducted by the École Nationale d'Administration Publique, INAP, an organization based in Quebec, Canada. The INAP actuaries are qualified and experienced in international social insurance valuations and prepared the review in accordance with the standards of the International Actuarial Association. The key objectives of this review are to evaluate the current condition of the national insurance system, assess the long-term financial sustainability of the NIS, analyze the financial impact and modifications to current NIS provisions, and provide recommendations for the continued sustainability of the NIS. The 9th Actuarial Review therefore gives a comprehensive analysis and sound recommendations for ensuring that the citizens of Trinidad and Tobago continue to benefit for years to come from the NIS system. Current and long-term condition of the NIS. At present, the contribution rate is 12%. The maximum insurable earnings, $12,000 per month. There are also 23 benefits, which include the provision of a minimum monthly pension of $3,000. Madam Speaker, the last review, that is the 8th actuarial review, projected that the expenditure incurred to pay national insurance benefits would exceed contribution income for the first time in the financial year 2013-2014. This did in fact come to pass and has repeated itself in the financial year 2014-2015. The 9th actuarial review tells us that the situation has not changed. What this means, Madam Speaker, is that under the present conditions and parameters of the system, the contribution income that is being collected is insufficient to meet all benefit obligations. As a result, the NIB has had to utilize investment income to support the expenditure of the system. Notwithstanding this, total assets of the NIS are projected to increase until 2018-2019. From 2019 onwards, if no reform measures are implemented, as recommended by the actuaries, assets will have to be liquidated to meet expenditure, and the NIS funds will be completely depleted in the financial year 2029-2030. I wish to make it clear that will only happen if no reform measures are implemented. This will not be allowed to happen under this current government. Madam Speaker, fund depletion is a reality faced by many social security systems around the world. One of the main causes of this is the aging population syndrome. Those who pay national insurance contributions, our working population, are in fact the financiers of the NIS. As the ratio between workers and beneficiaries narrows over time, more and more pressure is placed on the system. According to the 9th review, on average 3.7 working persons now support the payment of one person in retirement. This is projected to decline to 1.1 persons supporting one retiree over the next 50 years. Trinidad and Tobago is currently the second oldest population in the Caribbean behind Barbados, who have already taken measures to modify their system in order to improve the sustainability of their national insurance fund. Madam Speaker, in spite of the challenges faced by the NIS, I wish to remind this House that we've increased the cap on the income received by retirees in respect of national insurance and old age pensions to $5,000 a month. A person in receipt of the $3,000 pension from the National Insurance Board can therefore qualify for up to $2,000 from the Ministry of Social Development. This illustrates the commitment of this government to treating with the elderly and the vulnerable in our society. Come now to the recommendations. Madam Speaker, the actuaries have made a number of recommendations. The short-term recommendations are that there be an increase in the maximum insurable earnings from $12,000 to $13,600. This increase is in the order of 13.3% and is intended to cover an additional $1,600 of insured income, which is in line with the increase in the national wage over the 3-year period of this review. Madam Speaker, despite the pressures being placed on the fund, one of the principal benefits of Social Security is to maintain the relevance of benefits to customers over time. We are committed to this. 2, maintaining the minimum monthly retirement pension at its present level of $3,000 at least until the beginning of 2017. 3, the actuaries found that a Social Security minimum pension should be between 40% and 80% of the minimum wage. However, the NIS pension of $3,000 represents 115% of the minimum wage. In light of this, future changes to the minimum pension must be guided by subsequent actuarial reviews. They've also recommended that the contribution rate be increased to 13.2%. Madam Speaker, the implementation of these measures, the increase in the maximum earnings, and the increase in the contribution rates were announced in the national budget and will take effect from July 4th, 2016. This should delay fund depletion by at least 6 years. In terms of long-term recommendations, the actuaries have recommended an increase in the retirement age, a change in the earnings class system to a percentage of earnings system, and that all parameters should be subject to an automatic annual adjustment based on inflation. Madam Speaker, all of these measures will require dialogue at the national level. These are merely recommendations at this point in time. The actuarial review also recommended extending coverage to self-employed persons, details of which are given in the report laid into this House. Madam Speaker, the 9th review has shown that the financial condition of the NIS has deteriorated over the 3-year period from July 2010 to June 2013. The review also projects that this trend is likely to continue unless major reforms are taken. This is not unique to Trinidad and Tobago, and it is now necessary to engage all stakeholders, Madam Speaker, in a national dialogue on the findings and recommendations of this 9th actuarial review. This dialogue, this feedback, this consultation will inform us on the mix of reform measures as we go forward. I thank you, Madam Speaker.
The Minister in the Ministry of the Attorney General and Legal Affairs.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I have been authorized by the Cabinet to make the following statement. As a citizen of the Republic of Trinidad and Tobago and Minister of Government, I rise here today charged with the responsibility and task of informing my fellow citizens of this beloved Twin Island state of a very serious matter that is affecting us. The population was made aware sometime early last year of the award of a contract by the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago, NGC, to Super Industrial Services Limited, SIS, for the design and build of the Beetham Water Recycling Plant, together with the associated pipelines and water storage facilities. This project is commonly known as the Beetham Wastewater Project. We were told that the purpose of this project was to recycle output water from WASA's existing wastewater treatment plant to industrial water quality standard and to take the pipe-treated water from Beetham to the Point Lisas Industrial Estate using newly built pipeline infrastructure. The RFP for this project was issued on December 10, 2013, and the last administration awarded this design-build project to SIS via a contract dated March 10, 2014, in the sum of approximately $1,037,154,560 TT dollars, over $1 billion. It is noteworthy that SIS was not the lowest bidder on this project. In fact, SIS's bid was $464,196,390, more than the other bidder. The contract awarded is a FIDIC plant and design build for electrical and mechanical plant and engineering works designed by the contractor type contract. The responsibility and onus for designing and building the water recycling plant, together with the associated pipelines and water storage facilities, was that of SIS. The completion date for the design and build-out of the wastewater plant, associated pipelines, and storage facilities was October 21st, 2015. It is noteworthy that the last administration paid a 20% mobilization to SIS. It is not usual to have as high as 20% mobilization fee. In this case, NGC made an advance payment to SIS, which was $207,430,810. Madam Speaker, a mobilization fee is usually worked back through the life of a contract with appropriate credit or repayment being given. To date, none of this mobilization or advance payment of some $207 million has been repaid or credited to NGC by SIS. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, to date, NGC has paid SIS the sum of approximately $780 million, with the last payment certificate certified by NGC for work being done in May 2015. Madam Speaker, on October 8, 2014, SIS was awarded a further contract by NGC for the operation and management of the Beetham Water Recycling Plant for a 5-year period with a value of approximately $56.4 million. Madam Speaker, the question is, why was NGC utilized as the entity to contract SIS for the design build of this water provision facility, as opposed to WASA? WASA is a statutory body charged with the responsibility for water supply in Trinidad and Tobago. The question asked is, why did the former administration undertake this billion-dollar project under the National Gas Company of Trinidad and Tobago, as opposed to WASA? It has also been discovered, Madam Speaker, that to date, there is no off-take contract entered into for the final water product from this project. Therefore, NGC, whose mandate was not and is not the provision of water, entered into this contract for over $1 billion, paying out over $780 million to SIS to date, and only approximately 40 to 45% of the project work is completed, when over 75% of the full cost of the project has already been expended from the cash coffers of NGC. Madam Speaker, the newly appointed board of NGC is having an independent assessment done of the works performed to inter alia ascertain the quantum and percentage of work actually performed. This is an essential and prudent step to take in the circumstances that I shall now outline. Today, Madam Speaker, the situation is this. There is a $1 billion project entered into with no contract for the end product, $780 million paid out from NGC's cash flow and reserves. That sum paid out is approximately 75% of the total cost of the project, and the project is only 40 to 45% complete. With that contractual and factual background as a setting, Madam Speaker, I crave your indulgence to state the most recent facts. SIS began slowing down works prior to the general elections. This slowdown of work became even more apparent after September 7th. Madam Speaker, after the elections, NGC received several reports from the subcontractors of SIS as to the non-payment of monies due to them by SIS. On September 14th, exactly 1 week after the general elections, SIS wrote to NGC in an attempt to extricate itself from its contractual obligations, after having already been paid $780 million and only completing 40 to 45% of the works, by saying that, quote, people now holding high office in the government of Trinidad and Tobago have made serious allegations about the project and the conduct of officials of NGC and SIS, and as a result, SIS is reasonably certain that steps would now be taken by the state to stop or frustrate SIS in the successful execution of this project. There was no evidence, Madam Speaker, to support this position that the new government would have stopped or frustrated SIS from completing the project. Madam Speaker, NGC responded to this, denying any allegations of state interference and stating that NGC was committed to enforcement of the contract and that it expected SIS to continue to deliver all contractual obligations in a responsible and timely manner. There then ensued an exchange of correspondence and communications between SIS and NGC, where SIS claimed that it had underbid on the project at the tender stage and was unable to continue the works. This, even though SIS's price for the project was $464 million more than the next bidder. SIS also suddenly claimed, Madam Speaker, that it had safety and security threats and had used this as its excuse to begin the withdrawal from the construction resources and manpower and equipment from the sites on October 8th. By letter dated October 15th, SIS wrote to NGC stating, inter alia, we regret to advise we are unable to continue the works under the current circumstances and current conditions of contract. By this time, SIS had stopped the vast majority of the work being done and it had begun vacating sites. NGC responded by letter stating, NGC is alarmed and deeply disturbed that SIS, which is contractually obligated to complete the works, can simply write a letter advising NGC of its inability to complete 2 weeks before the completion date. We regard this as a fundamental breach of contract. Please be assured that NGC is committed to completing this project, having paid SIS US $121.8 million to date, the bulk of the contract price. At a subsequent meeting between the parties, NGC listed and SIS indicated that there were 3 problematic areas: engineering design challenges, financial challenges, safety and security challenges, the absence of front-end engineering design resulting in a significant underestimation of the project parameters. SIS erred in providing adequate contingencies in its bid. There were major cost overruns in the areas of engineering pipeline. SIS could only proceed with the works after an in-depth review and revision with NGC of the contract price, program of works, payment schedule, and the resolution of ongoing safety and security threats. Madam Speaker, in response to these matters raised by SIS, NGC stated it would continue to pursue the successful completion of the project. Subsequently, Madam Speaker, SIS stated that it had underbid on the project at the tender stage and was unable to continue the works. These matters being raised by SIS after it had been paid $780 million, some 75% of the total cost of the project, with only 40 to 45% of the works being completed. Not forgetting, Madam Speaker, that SIS's bid was $464 million more than the next tenderer. Wow. Madam Speaker, on Friday, the 20th of November 2015, after due and proper consideration of the facts, failed attempts to discuss the way forward and the advice obtained, NGC gave SIS written notice of its intention to terminate the design build contract. NGC recapped SIS's positions. It was unable to continue the works under the current circumstances. It had underbid on the project at the tender stage, and that it had also failed to renew insurance and advance payment bond. In other words, Madam Speaker, in the clearest possible terms, SIS had demonstrated that it had abandoned the works, or alternatively did not intend to continue performance of its obligations under the contract.
Honourable Member, your time has expired. The text of your statement shall be circulated to members.
Personal explanations, introduction of bills, motions relating to the business or sittings of the House, and moved by a minister.
Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that Dr. Boendradat Tiwari be appointed to serve on the Joint Select Committee to consider and report on a bill entitled the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Amendment Bill 2015.
Honourable members, the question is that Dr. Boendradat Tiwari be appointed to serve on the Joint Select Committee to consider and report on a bill entitled the Public Procurement and Disposal of Public Property Amendment Bill 2015. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it. Leader of the House.
Thank you very kindly, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I beg to move that Mr. Prakash Ramadar be appointed to serve on the Joint Select Committee to consider and report on a bill entitled the Whistleblower Protection Bill 2015.
Honourable members, the question is that Mr. Prakash Ramadar be appointed to serve on the Joint Select Committee to consider and report on a bill entitled the Whistleblower Protection Bill 2015. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? The ayes have it.
Public business, private business, motions.
The member for Caroni East.
Madam Speaker, I beg to move the following motion standing in my name. Whereas from 2010 to 2015, the People's Partnership Government, the former government, provided core textbooks and workbooks to all students in early childhood education centers, primary schools and secondary schools, and learning material to special needs students at no cost to parents. And whereas a commitment was made by the former government to continue this agreement for the academic year 2015 to 2016, and whereas there was a further commitment made by the former government that for the academic year 2015 to 2016, e-books would be introduced on a phased basis in Forms 1 and 2 in selected subject areas, and whereas the Ministry of Education has not provided new textbooks, workbooks, learning material, or replacements for the academic year 2015 to 2016, which has resulted in financial hardship for families and loss of educational material for both students and teachers. Be it resolved that this government take urgent steps to ensure that all students are provided with textbooks, workbooks, and/or other learning material in fulfillment of commitments given for the academic year 2015 to 2016. Madam Speaker, education is a fundamental human right and essential for the exercise of all other human rights. It promotes individual freedom and empowerment and yields important development benefits. There are legal obligations to the rights of education. the rights of every individual to enjoy access to education, particularly our students, to good quality without discrimination or exclusion is an imperative. And education remains the cornerstone and fundamental pillar of any civilized society. The People's Partnership Government firmly supported a strong commitment to education. And under the leadership of Prime Minister Kamla Prasad Bisesa, we had ensured major transformative changes, a silent revolution, a re-engineering and a retooling of our education system with equity, accessibility, and quality. Madam Speaker, before I deal with the first aspect of the motion, I think it is important for us to understand where we are and in relation to where we are in education and how the deprivation of textbooks for certain students could lend to us not moving with the momentum that we started even since Dr. Eric Williams' days, and which continued through the years by subsequent administrations and subsequent ministers. Trinidad and Tobago is now being globally recognized as one of the leaders in education, not only in the Caribbean and Latin America, but globally. This country can rightfully claim to be one of the few that has fully implemented Article 26 of the Human Rights Chart, which establishes that everyone has the right to a free education. Everyone has a right to a free education, and there should be no deprivation. And even though schooling has been mandatory in Trinidad and Tobago since the 1970s, no previous government has ever placed so much emphasis on this subject, if I may say, as the People's Partnership Government. The only way for a country like ours to move forward, and move forward on its human capital towards sustainable development, is placing a strong emphasis on education. And we look forward to this present government continuing the strong work that we did over the last 5 years and keeping the momentum going for our students. Since the People's Partnership Government took power in 2010, the largest chunk of the national budget for all the years has been on education. And in 2014-2015, the Education Ministry received the largest part of the annual expenditure, $9.3 billion, shared by Minister Karim's ministry, Ministry of Tertiary Education and Skills Training. And in 2014-2015, that was out of $55 billion then. And in 2014-2015, $10.6 billion was allocated. That is close to 6% of the GDP, Madam Speaker, and which is higher than many developed countries, which give close to about 4.5% of their GDP. And it's close to 16 to 18% of the annual expenditure from our annual budget. And when you look at the United States, Canada, Great Britain, Australia, developed countries, they come close to 12 to 14% of the annual expenditure, and we are 14 to 16%. And this is in the context of the financial requirements that we need to provide the basic essential tools for our students, and that is the textbook and the working materials. And this is why this motion was brought forward, because we have questions and uncertainties as to where the students are at the moment. Conscious that the main economic assets of the most advanced nations are knowledge and information, and in their own citizens, which Prime Minister Kamla Prasad Bisesa had always stressed. At that time, the Prime Minister had always placed the strongest emphasis on education. In the manifesto of 2010, she stated, and I quote, "The oil and gas boom of the last decade has fizzled out, and the hard work of building a sustainable economy stands before us," close quote. For this reason, the government needs, open quotation, to ensure that our oil and gas wealth is truly used for the development of our nation and our people, close quote. Therefore, the Ministry of Education's objective is, open quote, "building the foundation for an intelligent nation and a creative economy from early childhood through primary and secondary education," close quote. The Prime Minister Bissessor kept her promise and delivered to the nation unparalleled and unprecedented performance in government in areas of education, health, infrastructure, housing, water, public utilities, and others. The ultimate objective was the massive investment from early childhood all the way up to the undergraduate level. For the postgraduate level, the state pays up to 50% of all expenses. So when I speak now about the requirements for education of universality, accessibility, equity, and quality, these are watchwords and should be always our policies on education. No child must be left behind, and ours is an inclusive model. So no child of any underprivileged socioeconomic group or position should be deprived from education whatsoever.
Correct.
And this is where we are finding some difficulty in understanding or ascertaining whether textbooks have been provided to the students which are required for particularly the underprivileged ones who do not have the availability or finance to buy their books for themselves. And let's look at a little background into this. So the Textbook Evaluation Committee was set up and approved by Cabinet Minute number 926 of September 2002. That's the Textbook Evaluation Committee. Before that, I remember the administration of Vasdev Pandey had difficulties in terms of looking at these students taking a number of books to schools on their shoulders and on their backs. And he made a determined effort to try to reduce the amount of textbooks that students were taking to school for a particular subject. And he formed a textbook evaluation committee. I was a member of that textbook evaluation committee in 1997, where Ken Ramchand was the chairman of that. And at the end of that, the decision was made to allow principals to choose out of one book, at which the textbook evaluation committee had registered. And then there was a little uproar, and his administration then allowed to choose one out of two books per subject, so that the students would not have to take 3 and 4 books in a particular subject to school, which sometimes the teachers were asking for information from different books. So that was sorted out. And this committee in 2002 was later, well, nothing happened for 2 years. And the Textbook Evaluation Committee did not start working until 2004. And then that committee was later reconstituted to a Learning Materials Evaluation Committee by Cabinet Minute 1710 dated July 20th, 2006. So that's 2 years later. The Textbook Evaluation Committee was changed to a Learning Materials Evaluation Committee, otherwise known as LMEC. In recognition of the fact, the committee's remit went outside of the scope of the books, including other materials. They began to bring in other materials, particularly for the special needs students and the early childhood education students. But that committee came to an end in 2009. Madam Speaker, the unit that was set up was asked on the remit to recommend textbooks and a wide range of special learning and teaching resources such as study guides, past papers, syllabi, cassettes of audiovisual material and multimedia items such as DVDs, CDs, and video cassettes, as well as teachers' handbooks and other tools. Also accessories and manipulatives to early childhood care and education centers, primary, secondary, and special schools at the level of the government, denominational, and private schools. And that was across Trinidad and Tobago, and which was undertaken in accordance with the requirements of the curriculum. So the books in accordance with the requirements of the curriculum. Subsequent to that, there were several cabinet agreements in the ensuing years that impacted on the program. In 2005, under previous PNM administration, the program was expanded to school books, government supply, to include Forms 4 students. It was agreed that the full-scale rental program would be implemented in 2006-2007, with students paying $20 per textbook. And that was apparently rescinded in 2006 because there was some uproar. In December 2007 to 2008, Cabinet agreed that existing books should be retained as long as they are in good condition and in alignment with the curriculum. And that program would consist of top-up of all textbooks in the system. So the PNM administration started a system of having the books circulated amongst the students from one year to an incoming year once the book was readable and not tarnished, not defaced. And then they would have a top-up from year to year. So the textbook evaluation committee began to determine which books are suitable for use by students at the primary and secondary levels for the education system. And I remember now deceased Richard Kokoram, a principal of Hillview, Winford James, Clyde Pomel, Neville Beard, Richard Penco, and Father Ronald Menz were all members of that committee that started then. And they had recommended one textbook in 4 subject areas per student in Forms 1 and 2, then to 8 subject areas, and a dictionary and an atlas, and also that included CSEC and CAPE past papers. Also, they recommended for primary schools 1 textbook in 5 subject areas. Primary schools, major, they had about 5 major subject areas. And they recommended 1 textbook under the textbook rental program. And in 2006, the LMEC, as I mentioned earlier, started with a retired permanent secretary, Winston Cornell, starting the work. Now, the preliminary report of that committee, of LMEC, on textbooks for the education system for the academic year 2007-2008 was not found favorable, having regard to the list of textbooks found unsuitable, far outweighing those found suitable. So in the evaluation of the textbooks, they found more were unsuitable for use by the students than they found suitable. And that therefore caused an imperative and an urgency of engaging the fraternity of authors and publishers in detailed stakeholder consultations. And that committee agreed that submission for review of textbooks for the period 2007 to 2010 be deferred to the period 2008 to 2011. And when they demitted office, our administration had to deal with the issue. And so the textbook committees, we conducted stakeholder meetings with authors and the publishers and all the publishers in the industry. We had many consultations with the publishers. And during the time that the PNM administration was in government, generally about 12 publishers were used and who provided textbooks to the school population. But then the publishers and authors began to raise their voices more and more. And there was a proliferation of more and more authors, and therefore more and more publishers. So as a new incoming government in 2010, and which deals with the first part of the motion, whereas from 2010 to 2015, the People's Partnership Government provided core textbooks and workbooks to all students in ECC primary and secondary schools and learning material to special needs students at no cost to parents. Let me provide to the national population through this Honorable House, Madam Speaker, what our administration did when we came into office in 2010 and subsequently. The textbook rental program of the Ministry of Education, we continue to provide students at primary, secondary, and special education schools with quality textbooks and learning materials. During 2010 to 2013, the Ministry of Education purchased 2,259,250 textbooks. 2,259,250 textbooks were provided during 2010 to 2013 for the students. And that included special education manipulatives and learning material. And that total cost was $208,422,422. So 2.2 million textbooks at a cost of approximately $208 million. Textbooks and learning materials, that is between 2010 to 2015. And I have the figures here that in 2010 to 2011, we provided 354,000 textbooks approximately at approximately 17.4 million. And 2011-2012, 342,000 textbooks at approximately 35 million, because there were more secondary school textbooks which are a little more expensive. And 2012-2013, 1.198 million textbooks at approximate cost of 84 million. That was more secondary school textbooks again. And in 2013 to 2014, 363,000 textbooks at a cost of approximately $70 million. So during 2010 to 2011, 2011 to 2012, 2012 to 2013, and 2013 to 2014, we had provided close to 181,824, the cost of 181,825, $181,825,759. And in 2014 to 2015, the approximate cost for that year was $25 million for the top-up textbooks. And Madam Speaker, that is in the context of how much money the Ministry of Education was available for expenditure. Out of the $4.3 billion that we have for recurrent expenditure, that does not include the public sector investment program, IDF, and capital development funding. $2.4 billion approximately went for salaries and personal emoluments out of the 4.3, close to about 55%. And about 230 million goes to the school feeding program. Now, at that time was 155,000 meals per day, about 100,000 lunches and 55,000 breakfasts. And for 200 days. So it costs about, we provide about 3.1 million meals per year. We spend about 150 million for security services, which generally is MTS which is a state sector company, about 150 million for janitorial services, which is about 100 million to MTS, 50 million for school transportation, 50 million for examination fees, and of course the textbooks. Approximately, if for 5 years we spent 208 million, is approximately 40 million per year. And that's how the expenditure goes. So the Ministry of Education main strategy to transform the education sector through the infusion of information communication technology was undertaken. And in this regard, the ministry had been investigating the feasibility of incorporating electronic textbooks since the students had their laptops in the schools. Putting that into the textbook rental loan program. And the findings of that exercise indicated that that of the 426 titles purchased at the primary level, so in the primary school level, books were purchased for about 426 titles. I'll come to that in a while, why that happened. And only 63 of these 426 were found to be compatible with an electronic form at that time, and available in that e-format. And at the secondary level, of the 467 titles purchased, only 95 were available in electronic form at that time. And this highlighted that incorporating e-books into the textbook rental program was not feasible at that time within the procurement cycle due to limited availability of textbooks in the e-format. And the ministry continued to hold consultations with publishers. Now about close to 30 publishers, moved up from about 12 to 30 publishers, and a lot of international publishers as well, focusing on exploring the incorporation of electronic textbooks into the program and the arising challenges. The sessions highlighted concerns of copyright issues, different payment structures, and possible distribution methods for the electronic textbooks. And all of those issues required further research and discussion, requiring all stakeholders to do more work. And the ministry recognized the benefits e-books will bring to the textbook rental loan program, namely a reduction in logistical and replacement costs. And as such, the ministry continued to partner with textbook publishers to address concerns in an effort to incorporate e-books in the textbook rental loan program. And we also brought the Publishers Association into the stakeholders' consultations. In 2014-2015, the ministry provided 256,000 textbooks approximately at the primary level. And this was comprised of a top-up of replenishment of books in mathematics, language arts, reading, science, and social studies from Standard 1 to Standard 5 based on data collected from schools. Now, when we realized in 2012 that the textbooks that the Ministry of Education was purchasing from the publishers, which started in the PNM administration time, the principals and the teachers were not using some of these books. They felt they needed to get the books that they thought that they wanted to use. And this is why they began to ask parents to purchase other books other than the ones that the Ministry of Education was providing. And at one time, there were stacks and stacks of textbooks in rooms in the schools with cellophane wrap, and they were never used. So the ministry was purchasing books even before our time to be used in the schools, and they were not used by the principals and the teachers. And so we made a decision to ask the principals and the teachers to supply the requirements, what they require and what they feel that they will use in the schools. And what we obtain after a number of times seeking information from the principals, through the supervisors, and with the teachers, we eventually had a list of what they required from all the schools, primary and secondary, and of course the early childhood education centers throughout Trinidad and Tobago. So from 2012, that was the first time that we bought books for all the students in primary, secondary, and early childhood education centers, rather than just the topping up. So we bought an annual full replacement of workbooks in reading, language arts, and science at infant level 1 and 2. And additionally, in alignment with the ministry's priority of improving numeracy and literacy, the ministry also had 100% replacement of mathematics textbooks, as well as accommodation of textbooks in language arts at the infant 1 and 2. The age of the students and interactive nature of these textbooks required students to write in the books. So we provided 100% replacement for these books. At the secondary level in 2014-2015, the Ministry of Education procured 41,000 textbooks for secondary schools, and this comprised a top-up. And at the special education level, we provided special textbooks, manipulatives, and other learning materials to the students who have special needs challenges. And these materials were provided to government and private registered special education schools, namely about 26, based on their request. And so the cost of that program in 2014-2015 was about $25 million. And this expenditure on textbooks comes from the subhead current transfers and subsidies, subhead 006 educational institutions, sub-item 26 special education resource program. And then we have two subheads, a textbook rental loan program for primary schools and textbook rental loan program for secondary schools. I'm making these statements because 2 months now into this academic year, it is our understanding that textbooks have not been provided to the students in the secondary schools and in the primary schools and in the ECC centers and the special education centers for the students. And we are wondering why. Why is it that an approximate value this cycle in 2015-2016 was going to be the cycle for the purchase of all fresh textbooks, and the topping up will continue in 2016-2017 and 2017-2018. And as such, we had some difficulties on the way because authors and publishers began to feel that they needed to be a part of the system of provision for textbooks for our students. And we allowed the freedom of choice, which empowered principals and teachers to choose the required titles based on the individual student learning abilities and school needs. And this shift in policy created a fair open market where schools could have selected any textbook but were limited to one core book per subject area. And this increased the number of suppliers from 17 publishers to 43. And additionally, the number of titles increased to 426 in the primary, at which 313 were new titles, therefore new authors of textbooks. And at the secondary level, 467 titles were purchased, which 397 were new titles. But the shift ensured that the textbook being provided was sufficiently utilized. However, that impacted on the cost of the programs, because if you buy in bulk, you get it cheaper, and if you have about over 400 authors and titles, you have to pay a little higher for each one. Now, so the bulk discounts enjoyed by the ministry were no longer applicable as the scope of requested titles increased, but the requested quantities dramatically declined. Madam Speaker, the issue of more publishers in the system, more authors, giving the principals and the school teachers the ability to choose their books. We went ahead, and for the first time in 2012, we had a situation where the publishers were now printing their textbooks in Trinidad, giving employment to all the printing organizations. There were 4 major printing companies in Trinidad now printing the books locally, whereas previously most of the printing were done internationally and a lot were done in China. So when we gave this ability in 2012 to have the publishers, more publishers, they chose to go locally and have the local printers do most of the work. And in 2015, 2016, we made a decision in Cabinet, and Cabinet Note 1963, August 3, 2015, to provide these textbooks, as I indicated here in the motion. Whereas the Ministry of Education has not provided new textbooks, workbooks, learning material for the academic year 2015 to 2016, which has resulted in financial hardship for families and loss of educational material for both students and teachers. At the beginning of August, the Cabinet had taken the decision to provide these textbooks as a new start, the new cycle, at a cost of $136 million, which included the top-ups for 2016, 2017, and 2017, 2018. There was money available from the previous budget, and what was needed was $111 million, approximately. So we are asking now the Minister of Education to tell us why, after 2 months, the students are going to the parents having to go to everywhere, particularly for poor students who cannot afford to purchase these books that are used in the school, and are begging for help when 2 months have gone by and the Ministry of Education, as far as I'm aware, have not been able to provide these textbooks for the students. So we are asking, why have these books not been provided? The Cabinet Note was there for everyone to see at the Ministry of Education. It was just a matter of follow-up to go into the details of it, complete it, make the order, and more than 90% of the textbooks used in the schools are done, you can get it locally. There's only about 5 to 10% of the books come from foreign publishers. And even that, with the foreign publishers, you just have to pay a minimal amount more to have these books air-shipped into Trinidad and Tobago. So what has prevented this government from providing the students with the textbooks that they need? Now, the textbooks is one aspect of the education of the children, but why are we having 15 schools closed? Why we have no moderators and facilitators in the primary schools to do the continuous assessment component? Why is the continuous assessment component being looked at of being abolished? Why have the 400+ homework centers stopped? That is a minimal cost of about $10 to $12 million per year. Why has the construction of schools stopped? Why is the minister speaking about schools being closed because of sewer problems and electrical problems. We used to have 5 schools per day breaking down, but within 3 days' time, we will have the schools up and running because we were able to get the sewer systems going. We were able to get the electrical systems going. So in 5 years, we did 5,000 repair and maintenance projects in over 800 schools in Trinidad and Tobago, because it's about 5 per day breaking down. And we had to do it quickly. And at no time during any academic year, we had 15 schools closed. And, you know, textbooks become an important part of the education of the children. So here they're being deprived from the textbook. They're being deprived from the schools, not able to go to the schools because the schools are closed. You don't have moderators and facilitators in the system. The schools are not being repaired, and all this statements about EFCL and so on. You are the minister. You are responsible for EFCL. Get EFCL to do the work. I had to get them to do the work. Yes. You had to direct them. Yes. You had to direct them and make sure that they do the work. But you in charge. You're only finding fault, and you're finding and escorting people out of the building for what? Yeah. What are you escorting people out of the building? Madam Speaker, they speak about contractors. The members speaking about contractors. Out of the 106 early childhood education centers we constructed in Trinidad and are under construction now, 58 contractors are the ones who have done them, 58 for 106, and 53 of these were done by the IADB under IADB scrutiny. And these ranged from between $5 million to about $8 million, VAT inclusive, Madam Speaker. And out of the 46 primary school constructed, 28 different contractors constructed these 46 primary schools. And you know what, Madam Speaker? That administration in 2009 awarded contracts worth $1.5 billion for the construction of secondary schools, which we had to deal with because of the silly HVAC system that they tried to put in. And then $60 million went with the Haji construction with a South Korean company outside of Trinidad and Tobago. And here they're talking about mismanagement and corruption and nepotism and so on. 28 out of 46 primary schools, 28 contractors. 102 ECC centers, 56 or 58 contractors. And today we are saddled, you are saddled now. I was saddled with over $195 million legal questions, legal cases coming before the Ministry of Education by design consultants which designed schools in 2004 which were never started. $195 million in legal fees by design consultants to the Ministry of Education. They have to explain that. And one supervising consultant, one design consultant, got 10 secondary schools. That is true. One person, I wouldn't call the name today. I wouldn't call the name. They know who it is, one of their friends. Yeah. And, you know, Madam Speaker, it is sad to see our students suffering for lack of textbooks in the schools. And the minister knows 15 schools still closed. Here it is. So why? Sewer problem, shut down another school. Sewer system supposed to take 2 to 3 days to clear up. And the minister, I don't know what he's doing, but I don't want to make any negative comment. But he has to take responsibility for it. Yeah. And you know, one of the members said the last time when we had finance that EFCL was owing 600 and something million to contractors. You know how much we came into office in 2010, how much we were found owing? $722 million was being owed by EFCL when we came into office. And I have the breakdown. So all your forensic audit and all of that you want to do to try to incarcerate people and take them out with police hands and so on. Yeah. All of them. That's what we want to do.
blame others, blame others, Madam Speaker. $722 million this People's Administration government was being owed. Yeah, we were owing to for work that they said that they started. One of their friends got 3 secondary schools, value $500 million. One of their members of their team, yeah, one of the senior members of the PNM team got 3 secondary schools valued over $500 million. So 10 secondary schools are supposed to start in 2004. They didn't start it until 2009. We ended up with an HVAC system. Madam Speaker, how much time I have again?
Order that.
Another?
1 minute. 1 minute.
All right, a minute and a half. So, Madam Speaker, I asked the Minister of Education, why has he not been able to provide the textbooks to the children, making the poor people have to go and try and beg and borrow and get money for the education of the children, because the children are their primary concern. So thousands of families across the country are being affected. If they had saved some of the money that they misspent, and with Haji and all of that $1.5 billion that they gave out in contracts, they would have had money now to be able to help the poor students of Trinidad and Tobago. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I beg to move, Madam Speaker. You want a second? And reserve the right to speak. Yeah.
I second the motion and reserve the right to speak.
Honourable members, the motion being seconded, I shall now propose the question for debate. Be it resolved that this government take urgent steps to ensure that all students are provided with textbooks, workbooks, and/or other learning material in fulfillment of the commitments given for the academic year 2015 to 2016. Honourable Member.
Madam Speaker, good afternoon. Good afternoon to members on both sides of the House. I am extremely pleased, Vice Captain or otherwise, to be allowed to respond to this motion. Extremely pleased. In fact, I'm tremendously grateful to the member for Caroni East, because if I had one disappointment after my first discourse in this House during the budget debate, it was that I was only allowed to finish half of what I intended to discuss. So he has unwittingly allowed me, via this motion, to speak to the other half of the matters I intend to discuss. So, sir, to you I am very grateful. I intend to. When I read this motion, I was at first confused as to what I was reading. I wasn't sure if all this whereas, and whether it was a pantomime or a conceit in the literary sense, or whether I was seeing something real. Because if I were to give a frank response to this motion, I would probably want to channel my inner member of the Gomartin, Honorable Acting Prime Minister, the Gomartin Northeast, who in his response to the interesting question by the Honorable Member for Tabakit about his sign, responded that you should ask yourself. That constitutes a legitimate answer to this. More than anything, the author of this motion, if he wishes to get a really fundamental answer, there's a mirror in many rooms in this parliament. He needs look no further. But I have been forewarned by the Leader of Government Action that regardless of my personal views of the motion, that the citizens of this nation require a more considered answer to this motion. So I'll attempt to do so. And I'll do so in a way that puts it in a proper context. And given the fact that all of us know the recent history of this nation, nothing here should be lost in translation. All of us are aware in this nation that elections were constitutionally due on the 24th of May. And I would suggest that a wise or a responsible government would have ensured that they were called on that date. In fact, I might propose that a wiser political leader on the other side, for example, Mr. Basdev Pandey, might have chosen to call the election on the date for a number of reasons. One of them being that we have 2 military men in the House and their ranks far exceed our very talkative captain. And they could, for example, say that military strategy, it is best to catch your opponent underprepared or unprepared. Of course, that was not the option taken. But I would say more definitively, no, and I'll say it slowly, no responsible government, given the nature of the economic year in this nation, would have opted to have an election in September. No responsible Prime Minister, no responsible Parliament, no responsible political party, given that the financial year ends in September, would have opted to have a general election in September. That choice was made stands at its own condemnation. Why is that? Because we end up having an election on September 7th, one day before the school term begins. One day before the school term begins. Add to that, we have a budget that is read on October 5th, after the end of the financial year. But the member is asking in very sanctimonious terms, why have the books not been provided? Because after the budget is read, we have to go through the proper procedure, Standing Finance Committee, which takes a week or two. After that, finances have to be dispersed. And yet we ask why the books were not provided. I could suggest there's a mirror in the bathroom. He can go look at himself. Why is that? Because any responsible minister of government, any responsible minister of education, especially one who was convinced that he would retain the post, could have taken a number of measures to ensure that this textbook situation did not happen. He has just talked in very clear tones about all the things that his government did during their time, all the things he putatively did. The one thing he did not do was to make provisions for textbooks to be provided. So had he been minister, God forbid, he would have found himself in a far worse situation. Good sir, I shall not give way. Good sir, the error lies with you. I am also quite pleased that the member extended beyond his initially narrow parameters to discuss many of the other situations facing education in this nation. I am quite pleased by that because I intended to do the same. So he has allowed me to meander a bit beyond the narrow confines of his discourse. Because I want to make the point that the textbook situation in this nation as it stands is part of a larger paradigm, which has to do with the manner in which the former Minister of Education, the Honorable Member for Caroni East, chose to manage the Ministry of Education. In this nation, we often confuse symptom and cause, so we end up talking about the wrong thing. So his whole discourse is really based on a minor chord on a major theme. The larger theme has to do with the management of education. The textbook situation is just a subset of that situation. And I want to say this definitively. For, Madam Speaker, someone who has just stood and spoken I would love to say eloquently, but it would not be true, about the nature of education in this nation during the last 5 years, I want to say definitively, as I said during the budgetary debate, Madam Speaker, that the Education Ministry, inherited primarily by Minister Garcia and also by myself, is the quintessential example of organized chaos. And I want to say definitively that the author of that chaos is the honored mover of this motion. And I make no bones about it. The situation vis-a-vis the textbooks is really one subset of a larger problem. And to explain that, I really want to go back into explaining some of the situations that we are facing or have faced in the ministry for the last 2 weeks. Honorable members spoke about the fact that there are a number of schools that are closed. I want to add some depth to that discussion because the situation is actually more dire than that. We have 3 categories of problematic schools. There are schools that are closed, there are those that are unopened, and there are those that are operational in very dangerous circumstances. And I could provide living examples of each. Schools that are closed. There is one school that, through the intervention of Minister Garcia, opting to ensure that another arm of the state, in this case WASA, intervened to solve a sewer problem, had been having tremendous problems since earlier in this year, from March. The minister alluded to 5,000 repair jobs being done. I am asking a logical question, why so many? If one does a job properly, you don't have to do it repeatedly. The fact that 5 schools were, in his own words, Madam Speaker, breaking down every single day points to the fact that the jobs were not being done adequately. By his very own words, his argument is condemned. We had a number of schools in which shoddy contractual work was done, Madam Speaker, and it became a recurring decimal. And oftentimes the same contractors that did the mediocre work would be contracted to do them all over again. There is a very good example of such a school in my constituency, Ellswick Presbyterian, which for months this year was facing a recurring sewer problem. A recurring sewer problem. Since March, between March and November, constant closure, loss of teaching hours, frustration on the part of the principal. This only ended because the minister intervened and he asked WASA to make an intervention and they solved the problem. And for the last month, this school has been operational without a problem. But that's one example. Now, I am not sure if the number is 15. The last number I had was that there are 13 schools that are not opened. And this is not a situation that anyone should be proud of. But it's one we need to understand. If we don't understand it, it will not be solved in any kind of definitive matter. But aside from that, there are a number of schools that remain unopened. And by this I mean new schools that were constructed, that were hastily opened in the midst of the election fever and have never been occupied. There is a good example of that in my constituency, the new Grand Government School. Now, a few weeks ago, Madam Speaker, on Thursday is my constituency day, where we meet our constituents and we listen to their concerns and we try to make interventions. Because I don't have cabinet duties, I have decided to organize myself so that I visit schools in the morning in the constituency and in the afternoon I meet my constituents. So 3 weeks ago, I decided to visit the new Grand Government School. They have this very beautiful, massive structure on New Grand Junction, which has not been occupied, even though it was, quote unquote, opened. I visited the school and I spoke with the acting principal because the principal was not present, informing me that as far as she was aware, this brand new school, which has never been occupied, is facing an electrical and a sewage problem. Boggling my mind. How does a school which has never housed students have a sewage problem? I did what I always do in that situation. I called, Madam Speaker, the permanent secretary of the ministry. I called the DPS who deals with infrastructure. And because I am a bit familiar as an MP, I called TNTech to see if they would deal with that extant electrical problem. I created a bit of chaos, calling here, there, all morning. Eventually, the ministry called EFCL called TNTech. TNTech mobilized. They went and they actually took care of the electrical problem. So in my mind, I had solved a major issue, and within a day or two, school would have started. That enthusiasm, that bubble was burst very quickly, Madam Speaker, because in the same afternoon, in the midst of my euphoria, I received a call from the same DPS at the ministry who deals with these issues, informing me that that school, that newly constructed school at New Grand Junction, which I have been informed cost something like 25 million, could not be occupied because the Ministry of Works had flagged it with severe structural flaws, completely shattering my bubble. In fact, I was informed that the structural flaws were so severe that it might cost an exorbitant sum to fix them, or the next consideration, Madam Speaker, would be that we demolish the school and we start all over. Need I mention that the constructor of that school is a company with a 3-letter acronym that is so notorious in this nation now, I need not call the letters. But they've just recently lost a contract for a wastewater plant. Madam Speaker, I'm sure you understand to which company I'm referring. Subsequent to that, I have been informed that the situation is slightly better, that some corrective work was done over time, and that the school might be usable, but we are still awaiting a certificate of readiness from the Ministry of Works, also one from the regional corporation. And I want to state definitively here, it must be very frustrating for the people of New Grant, a rural community with which I'm very familiar, to be waiting and looking at this lovely building and facing very cramped conditions where they are housed right now in the Hindustan Community Center. I am sure that they are frustrated. I'm sure they loved what they see of their school. I'm sure they want to occupy their school. But I'm also sure it will be an act tantamount to the criminal if any minister of education in this nation allows students to be housed in a school that has not been declared structurally safe. And I am certain that neither minister in the Ministry of Education is going to sanction a move as foolish as that. So, Madam Speaker, not only do we have a number of schools that are closed, we have a number of schools that were hastily opened that are not operational for a number of reasons. Might I add as well?
Relevance.
Member. Honorable Member from Moruga, Tableland, I'll allow you to continue.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, might I reiterate that the Honourable Member Caroni is discussed not only one problem vis-a-vis the school books, but a number of problems plaguing the education system. And I am attempting in the most clear manner to deal with the issues that he has raised. I should add, Madam Speaker, to that New Grand story, not only was that school opened even though it had been flagged with serious structural issues, like a number of new schools constructed hastily in the run-up to the election, or completed, quote-unquote, hastily in the run-up to the elections, that school was opened in the absence of any furniture. So I'm not sure if the UNC policy on education was that we sit on, our students and teachers now sit on the floor. That school has yet to be provided with the commensurate furniture. So before it is opened, the ministry will have to ensure that the furniture is placed so that the students, when they eventually occupy, which we really hope will be in January, will have the furniture that is needed to ensure that they can be taught, they can learn properly. Madam Speaker, there is a third category of problematic schools that is directly aligned to the nature of management that was perpetrated by the member of Caroni, the honourable member of Caroni East as Minister of Education. Last week, Thursday, I made an impromptu visit to another school, which is not in my constituency. It's actually in the constituency of Princestown. But because many of the students that attend that school are the children of my constituents, I thought it correct that I should visit. Added to that, there were numerous reports in the media of difficulties in the school in terms of student behavior, in terms of teacher-student relationships. I thought it right that I should visit the school. This is the Princestown East Secondary. I had the distinct pleasure of entering a school where I was not recognized. In fact, I walked in and they were basically, "Who are you?" I had to say, "I'm the minister." And then I was taken to the principal. When you arrive in an ad hoc, impromptu manner, and a principal is extremely happy to see you, that for me is a source of concern. The principal there was very gracious, and Mr. Ali, he brought me to his office, and then a litany of woes was read out to me. The Princestown East Secondary School was completed and handed over to the Ministry of Education, Madam Speaker, in 2012. And the principal of that school took me on a tour of the compound. And I was so moved by what I saw, I turned into, quote-unquote, a paparazzi. I took a number of pictures, and I really, really wish that the Parliament had the purview for what the Americans in their system call show and tell. Because I would like to show the August members here some of what I saw while I walked around that school. A school that I would still term new, handed over just 2 years or 2.5 years ago, is in such a state that I was surprised. What did I see while I walked through this school? Walls with electrical wires exposed, electrical wires and PVC pipes coming out of the floor, so that students, if by mistake they stumble and fall, they can impale themselves on these pipes. Doors that are completely leaving the walls. And I'm not talking here about examples of vandalism, which there are in the school. I'm talking about examples of incomplete work that was passed. I'm talking about a vapor building that has never been commissioned and allowed for use by the school. I'm talking about a multi-purpose hall that is still not in use and has not been handed over to the school. I am talking about a field that is not fit for cows to graze, much less for students to play. I am talking about courts that are bolted and are not for the use of the children. And then you wonder why the students are acting up. And it was handed over to the ministry and accepted as complete under the tenure of the former minister. So, Madam Speaker, while I accept the move of the motion's notion that there are schools that are facing problems, the depth of the problems and the source of the problems, he did not vet in the most honest manner. But the problems extend beyond that. The problems extend beyond school books, they extend beyond infrastructure. There are other cultural issues that arose out of the tenure of the former minister. One of the things that we faced when we got into the ministry was the understanding that all of the relationships upon which the normal functioning of the ministry operated were broken. And a good example of that is the relationship between the ministry, Madam Speaker, and the major stakeholders in education. And by this, I refer to, for example, to the National Parent Teachers Association. I refer to tutor. I refer to the national boards. One of the things that the current minister, Madam Speaker, has done
Honorable Member, in the actual motion, you went outside and have opened up everything about education. Could you continue, please, Honorable Member for Moruga?
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I was saying, Madam Speaker, thank you very much. One of the situations that was made very clear to us from the onset was that the relationship between the ministry and its major stakeholders was broken. In fact, we were informed by a number of them that meetings with them and the minister would be ignored. Meeting times would be broken. In fact, it went so far that a number of them informed us that they were basically persona non grata at the ministry. One of the things that has been very useful in the opening period of our tenure as ministers is that Minister Garcia, in particular, was adamant that one of the first things we should do was to meet with all of the major stakeholders in education in this nation and to begin mending fences. And we have done that. We have not met every single stakeholder as of yet, but we've met a number of them, including the Parent Teacher Association, tutor, all of the board members, and we have set about the process of trying to mend these relationships. Without them, Madam Speaker, education in Trinidad and Tobago does not function properly. And the tenure, Madam Speaker, of the former minister imperiled all of those relationships. This is going to be a process that will take time, but I'm assuring this House, as well as the nation, we are going to mend those fences and get the education system back on board. There are a number of other issues. We have issues with staffing. We have issues with contracts. Madam Speaker, I was bemused, not amused, bemused to learn a few weeks ago while I was overseas on state duty that there were nurses protesting outside the ministry. Why? Because the short-term contracts that were awarded, Madam Speaker, to their lecturers were coming to an end, and they were panicked about the fact that they would have no one to teach them, so they took to the streets. And we have similar situations in a number of sectors, internally in the ministry also, because of the nature of the contract relationship perpetrated under the former regime. A number of staffing issues were created. It was fortunate that by the time I had returned, Minister Garcia had already, Madam Speaker, got a grasp of the situation and brought an end to what might have been a difficult situation for our nursing students. Additionally, other problems existed. We faced a situation where, and this was particularly galling to me, Madam Speaker, as a professional historian, that there were moves to remove the history of teaching from schools, or to minimize the teaching of history at the secondary level. So much so that our political leader was prompted during the election campaign to state categorically that when the PNM won the next election, one of the things that we would do was to ensure, one, that history would no longer be disenfranchised at the secondary level, but also that we would focus specifically on the teaching of history.
And you will need textbooks for that.
Exactly.
Good textbook.
Good textbook. In addition to that, Madam Speaker, we face a number of other situations. The honourable member has made mention of the debt that the ministry faces vis-a-vis those contractors that have not been paid by the Education Facilities Limited. I have heard and seen sundry numbers. I have seen in the media numbers high as 640 million. The figure provided to us in the ministry was some 572 million. This remains a problem. It does not, however, give an accurate picture or total picture of the economic situation facing the ministry. Our ministry at present, Madam Speaker, owes some $2 million US to Digicel for a project that we have great difficulty in quantifying or qualifying. That is so problematic that during our last meeting with the board of EFCL, we could not receive a legitimate answer as to whether there was ever a contract signed for the services provided by this country and the exact nature of those services to be provided. Added to that, my good friend, Madam Speaker, the Honourable Member for Dabadi O'Meara, constantly reminds me that our education ministry owes MTS some $73 million. And this is not the sum total of all of the monies owed, Madam Speaker. These are just the most obvious values. These situations are not emblematic of the competent management of a ministry. Madam Speaker, I could go on and on in terms of the negative situations that we face in the ministry, but at the end of the day, okay, I can answer that directly. The honourable member will be pleased to note, or pleased to understand, that a cabinet minute, a note was taken to cabinet last week dealing with the procurement of books, and this matter is already being handled. But I'll make the point again, Madam Speaker. The issues concerning the textbooks are really a minor chord on a major theme. There are larger concerns that are plaguing the ministry. The last 5 years, given the nature of the management of the minister, have been disastrous for the Ministry of Education. What Minister Garcia has inherited, Madam Speaker, is literally the calm after the hurricane has passed. And our task is to put this together. But I wish to state definitively to this House and to the nation, Madam Speaker, on one hand, that this PNM government, like every single PNM government before this one, remains committed to the education of our young people. That this PNM government intends...
Honourable Member, your speaking time has expired. You are entitled to avail yourself of a further 15 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Though I doubt I'll need all of them. Madam Speaker, I wish to make the point again. This PNM government intends, as every previous incarnation of our governments have, to deal seriously with the education of our young people. The PNM has always stood for development via education. That scenario has not changed. To this end, Minister Garcia and myself, we have identified along with our team a number of ways forward. It is not my intention here today, Madam Speaker, to somehow castigate or throw under the bus the Ministry of Education. This organization today is still full of very competent, very well-educated, very professional public officers. Very patriotic, thank you, public officers. And they have given us the kind of support that will be needed, that is needed to turn a negative situation into a positive one. A new board for the Education Facilities Company Limited has already been constituted. They have received their instruments and they are operational. This board has already undertaken the gargantuan task of reviewing the procedures and processes of this special purposes company. And even though the ministry and this board understands that the way forward is not going to be as straightforward as we would like it,
they have already begun the process of righting all that was wrong with that company. Added to that, the Ministry of Education intends to have a major consultation nationally on education next year, where stakeholders, large and small, will be invited to lend their 2 cents or many cents to the path forward for education in this nation. In addition to all of that, Minister Garcia and myself, along with the technocrats in the ministry, have already begun the process of reviewing the procedures and processes under which the ministry works, and we are moving towards ensuring that we implement best practice in the way that the ministry functions to take us into the future. Madam Speaker, the situation at the Ministry of Education is not ideal. Neither the minister nor I are pleased with the situation in which it exists at this moment. To say that we were not the creators of this is redundant. At the end of the day, the one thing that the Honourable Member for Caroni has said that I agree with is that we are now charged with the responsibility of fixing all that is wrong and charting a prudent way forward for the ministry. This is not going to be an easy task, but the mantle is ours. We are responsible to this House, to the nation, to the parents and the children. And this is not something that either Minister Garcia or I intend to shirk. Thank you very much. Yes.
Honourable members, may I suggest that this time we take the tea break? May I call on the Leader of the House?
Yes, Madam. Read and ready. Madam Speaker, under normal circumstances, as the standing orders indicate, we would have to finish by 6. However, the opposition has indicated that they are willing to, that they want to adjourn at this time. This is their day, private members' day. So, Madam Speaker, I'd like to indicate that I beg to move that this House do now adjourn to next Friday at 1:30 p.m. Madam Speaker, at that time we will be dealing with the motion to increase the borrowing limits under the Development Loans Act, Chapter 7104, the Guarantee of Loans Companies Act, Chapter 7182, and the External Loans Act, Chapter 7105. Madam Speaker, may I also indicate that notice of this motion will be sent by email to all members of the House. Thank you very kindly, Madam. Madam, may I indicate that next Friday is December 4th, and that's the date that we are adjourning to. Thank you.
Honourable members, the question is that this House do now adjourn to Friday, 4th of December, 2015, at 1:30 p.m. All in favour say aye. Aye. Any against? I guess the ayes have it. This House now stands adjourned to Friday, the 4th of December, 2015, at 1:30 p.m.
This is the Parliament Channel and Parliament Radio 105.5 FM. Follow the Parliament of Trinidad and Tobago on Twitter. Our call sign is @TTParliament.
Climate change and investment opportunities were only a few of the topics discussed when representatives from the Parliament of the United Kingdom visited our shores from February 1st to the 7th, 2015. During the delegation's week-long visit, they met with many government and parliamentary officials to engage in dialogue on issues affecting the two countries. Some of the discussions focused on domestic and sexual violence against women and gender issues facing the citizens of each representative's country. The visit also provided a forum for the exchange of ideas on crime and justice affecting our nation. The delegation comprised 8 members who fully represent the 2 houses of the United Kingdom.